Welcome back to the Rocket tutorial series, building a rocket game. This is part 3 where we'll be building some collidable objects so that you have some interesting things to play around with in the game. So here I've built an array of asteroids. These asteroids are collidable. If you hit them, they explode. They not only explode, but they spawn new, smaller asteroids, and they shoot off in random directions. So a couple things to note real quick. I have updated the version of Unity I'm using to 2020. You may have to go into the help menu, the help drop-down menu on the top, and hit the reset packages to default button and hit the yes button on the dialog that pops up. And that will fix some of the console errors that might come up when you do upgrade, if you do decide to upgrade. And there's no reason to upgrade if you are happy with whatever version you're in. All the scripts in this version or in this tutorial should work in any version of Unity. Okay, so let me show you what we've got going on. One more thing, actually, before we move on. I did update the PlayerController script on the rocket. I exposed the friction value, which was previously hard-coded, and I also exposed a rotation speed value, which was also hard-coded into our PlayerController script. And I'll do a quick recap of that in the PlayerController script before the end of this tutorial. But just to show you how this works, what you'll see at the end of this tutorial. Here we've got our rocket, pretty much the same as before. And there we go. We hit a couple of asteroids there and it spawned some smaller asteroids. They can hit each other and cause more explosions. And that's pretty much it for now. But let me just show you another scene I created to experiment with these asteroids. So I called it Asteroid Exploder Scene. In this scene, I started building these asteroids and adding scripts and experimenting with the effects and how they exploded. So here, the way that the asteroids are built is that there's an asteroid controller script, which we'll make shortly. In this script, there's a min speed, a max speed. So this is just the speed threshold for the particles that are spawned. There's a min-max direction. There's an explosion effect, which is the particle effect that happens. And then there's lives and whether it should respawn. So every time an asteroid is collided with, it passes on how many lives are left. And then it also passes on whether it should respawn. If there's 0 lives, then it won't respawn. If respawn is not checked, then it will just explode and that'll be the end of it. So in this scene, there's no motion. There's nothing I can fly around to collide with, but I just grab an asteroid and knock it into another asteroid, and you can watch it just start colliding with other asteroids. Now, one thing to note is that if you do start playing with the values on these asteroids, and ramping up the number of lives they have and how many times they respawn and how many objects they respawn, you will likely hit a scenario where you'll tax your computer and bring it to a screeching halt. So I would experiment carefully so that you don't bring your computer to a screeching halt, and certainly save before you test some of the higher values as you are experimenting. Otherwise, you can leave Unity stuck for a while, or you'll have to restart Unity. So other than that, I think we can go ahead and get into some of the scripting. All right, let's do it. All right, so I'm reloading back from where we started, or where we left off with part 2. One of the first things I want to do here is just play with the camera a little bit. So in order to get a larger view of the playing area, I'm going to switch the camera into orthographic mode. So this projection mode just does a 2D mode, so there's no depth in this view. But then I'm going to pull this back out to 75. So the size is 75. If you look in the scene window, you can kind of see what happens when you play with the size. So it shrinks or expands the box, and that creates a larger or smaller viewing area for the camera. Clearly, we don't need a near and far plane as large as it is, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So yeah, the difference really just here is if you're playing with a 2D game and you don't really need that 3D perspective, then you can switch to orthographic. Not to say perspective isn't cool, but I'm just going to use orthographic for now, as I think it's a little more appropriate for this tutorial. But again, it's not a big deal. It doesn't make that big of a difference. Okay. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is find our asteroid. So now here is where we're going to find a difference between Unity 2020 and 2018. So if you open up the asset store, you'll see that they have changed the way the asset store works. They basically removed the asset store from Unity and made it a standalone website. And then the way you get assets is you find them on the asset store, you purchase them, and then go to your package manager and import them from there. So I'll open the package manager and you'll see it opens up a window which just lists tons of assets. And there's quite a lot of assets in here. I'm not going to go into detail, but the Unity registry has a bunch of different assets, and you can get assets that are not approved yet or verified as well by going into the settings. So there are a lot of different assets you can get. Anyway, so I'll go into the asset store and I'll just do a quick search for Asteroid, and I know which asteroid I used, which was this one, the Asteroid Pack by Mark Dion. Actually, let me go back to this. So on the right side, as I've done before in the past, just check off that free assets filter, and you'll see the Asteroid Pack by Mark Dion is the top left option here. You'd come in here, just click on the Asteroid Pack. In this case, I've already downloaded it. I've already purchased it and added it to my account. But if you didn't, you just hit the blue button here that pops up. And once you do that, you can hit the Open in Unity button, and it takes you right to the package manager with Asteroids Pack selected. Now, if the Asteroid Pack wasn't selected, you could easily just type in the filter bar over here, Asteroid, and there you go. It's the top entry here. So I'll go ahead and hit the import button on the bottom right, and I'm just going to import the whole thing as it is. And I'll take a look down here in my projects window. You can see the Asteroid Pack has been added. Just to show you the quick demo scene that comes with it. This is it. We've got 3 asteroids, each one slightly different. They have a rotator script on them. And there's not much beyond this going on. You've got the nice sky background, the skybox. Well, I guess one thing to note about these asteroids is that if you look up here in the hierarchy, each asteroid's parent game object has a rotator script on it and a rigid body. But then below that, they have an asteroid LOD group. And you can see over here the LOD group shows you the asteroid at different levels of detail. So as you get a certain distance, it switches to a lower level of detail model, and it keeps going lower and lower the farther away you get, and then the closer you are, the higher res you are. So we're going to try and skip this LOD part and just grab one of the asteroid meshes out of this prefab that they have made. So first I'm going to create a quick scene here so we can play around in a separate scene. I'm going to call this Asteroid Exploder. Don't ask me why I'm calling it Asteroid Exploder. Well, actually, we're going to explode some asteroids. So I'll go ahead and drop this asteroid. Well, let me see which one. Which one shall we drop? So we can use this one or this one. I think I'm going to stick with the rounder, smaller asteroid. Yeah, let's do that. So, as I said before, we're not going to use the LODs in these asteroids. So I'm just going to pull the lowest level of detail asteroid out. And that'll force us to open the prefab. And I'm actually just going to create a new prefab out of this guy who's not in LOD like that. So here we go. Can take a look at it. So because this is the lowest LOD, it's going to be the most efficient in terms of the mesh. And you can see if you get a wireframe mode that the level of detail on this guy is pretty low. So I'll go back in the shaded wireframe. And I'm going to rename this to Asteroid. And I think that will help. Okay, so on our asteroid, we're going to add a couple of components. The first one is going to be a sphere collider. And again, just hit add component, start typing the name of the component, and that should be good enough. So our sphere collider just got added here. Nothing special about that. Oops. You can see it popped up, and it's approximately the size of our mesh, which is a good thing. And we will also want a rigid body. We're just going to use the base rigid body. We want to make sure that gravity is not turned on. We don't want this thing to fall when we hit play. So it should just stay in place. And then we'll go ahead and we'll start creating a new script. And I think we're going to split this into 2 videos. So I'm going to call this the Asteroid Controllers. I'm going to go ahead and start thinking through this. So our asteroid controller will need first, we want to detect the collisions. So we're going to go ahead and use an on trigger enter. So let's actually start down here under the update. So I'm just going to start typing on trigger enter and then hit tab, and it'll fill in the rest of the details for this method. So I'm just going to start by logging out that a collision has been triggered, and we can add the object name. And that should give us at least some information in the console that we are being triggered. So once we're triggered, we do want to disable our collider. Oops. Sphere collider. And just going to set the enabled property to false so that it can't be triggered again. So now, just to test this, let's let that compile. I'm going to grab this, drop the asteroid controller on it, and I will duplicate this asteroid here with a Control D, and I'll just put this other asteroid right next to it. So now we'll hit play, make sure we have our console visible, and you can see it's actually performing some physics. The reason for that is because our collider is not a trigger. So let's turn our collider on as a trigger on both of these objects. Once we prefab that, we shouldn't have to worry about updating our objects. So there we go, a collision has been triggered. And then the collider's turned off. So we turn those back on. And boom, collider's been triggered. And you can see it's telling us the names of the object, asteroid and asteroid 1. So there we go. That'll give us the ability to start detecting when collisions are happening. And the next thing we'll want to do is get a particle emitter in here, or at least an explosion effect in here, so that we can play that explosion when we collide with an object. So I'm going to just set up a game object, and we'll call this explosion effect. This will be a reference, and we will make sure this is a serialized field. And as we get into the explosion, we will start a coroutine. I'm going to call it play explosion. And now you can see the coroutine is underlined, this play explosion. A couple ways I can fix this. I can just start writing my own IEnumerator method, or I can right click, go to quick actions, generate method. You can also hit control period, and that takes you to quick actions. Now this didn't work properly because it set the return as a string, and it should be an IEnumerator. And then an IEnumerator needs to return a yield. Let's see, yield return null. There we go. So it just needs to return, it needs to yield a return, meaning that this will play asynchronously with the rest of the game, but it will play in its own update until it's completed. And so anytime it yields, you can yield return and wait for a certain amount of time, so wait for seconds. You can do a lot of things with a coroutine, but essentially it's really good for playing animations. So in this case, our animation is going to be an explosion effect, and we'll find that explosion effect shortly. I'm going to go ahead and instantiate an explosion effect. So we'll start by instantiating our explosion effect, which we made a reference to above, and we'll put it right in the same position where this collision happened. Yeah, and then quaternion identity. Just let's make sure we spell everything properly, and we'll get the explosion. Man, explosion. Make sure I can type properly tonight. Get component, and it's going to be a particle system that we're going to get, and we're just going to play that particle system. Now, the particle system that we're going to find will take approximately, wait for a second, 1.5 seconds. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll just destroy everything in here. So we'll destroy the explosion that we created, and then we'll destroy the game object. Okay, so that'll destroy this one destroys, and actually before we do this, destroy our asteroid. So this will destroy the asteroid. This one destroys our particle effect. So we'll go ahead and save that. So now let's go and hunt for the particle effect. Now, from the previous videos, we went and found some effects here. We found an effects pack, and it has quite a few effects, and we're going to see if maybe there's one called Big Explosion Effect, and there is. I'm going to use this one, and feel free to dig around and see if you can find any other explosion effects that you like. But let's go ahead and just make sure that that's populated. Now I only have it populated in one of these asteroids, which is this asteroid on the right. So this one won't shoot off any particle effects right now. All right, let's see what happens. Oh, there you go. And now my collider turned off, so it's not happening again. And it actually turned off on both of the objects, so it shouldn't happen again until we turn both objects back on. Let's see. Boom. All right, that's pretty good. All right, I'm going to leave it there for tonight, and then I'll come back next week with a little more progress on this explosion system and, I guess, asteroid system we're building. All right, I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know if you have any questions or comments in the feedback. Thanks.